going to take a couple of steps back. So somebody just starting off as a property developer, let's define, because I know this is probably a very straightforward question, but what do you consider as development, and what are the types of development? You could run us through a couple of those just briefly.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what I don't consider a property development is buying a block of land, building a house on it. That's just building a specky. I don't consider doing a reno property development. It's just doing a reno. Yeah. And the point of difference is this, is that, and some renos can be pretty big. They can be structural renos, they're almost like in the world of property development, but you start off with one house on one lot, and you end up with one house on one lot. What I tend to consider property development is where you increase the yield. In other words, the simplest form would be one lot into a 2-lot subdivision. So you start off with one lot, you end up with 2. To me, that's property development. That's a very simple subdivision, obviously. That's about the small. To me, that's the small development. That's just my definition, of course. Everybody's welcome to their opinion. But when you create more of something, to me, that's development. And then you can go up from there.
What's your kind of mindset around property development? Like, how do you think about property development? Because I know a lot of property investors, when they're starting out, there is buy and hold, there is renovation, and then all the way over here is development. Like, there's a huge gap to bridge. Like, how do you mentally get your head around it, or how can you help someone that's new to it to try and get their head around it?
Yeah, it doesn't have to be such a big gap. I mean, if you think of like buying a block of land, building a house, it's not really in dollar value much different from splitting a block in 2. So, but it is more complex, because more than often you've got to get a building. It's not a building permit, a development permit. Unless that 2-lot subdivision is a splitter, where you don't need to get a development permit. Just about everything else you do. So if it's 1 lot into 2, it's not a splitter. You got to get a development permit. If it's a duplex, got to get a development permit. Is 3 townhouses, 4. So obviously a lot more complexity. If you buy a block of land, want to build a house, it's a quick building permit. A certifier could do it in a day. Here you go, certified, bang, approved. So we're moving into a world of property development where even the approvals are more complex, and so because of that, we got to use more professionals. People like town planners, perhaps architects or building designers if we're going to do a building. Surveyors, and as we move through in the building permit stage, we're talking about engineers. Civil, structural, hydraulic engineers. These are people you don't need when you buy block land, build a house. So it's more complex, but obviously with that complexity comes the returns in terms of your profit.
Kind of unpack some of those professionals just so we can lay them out in a way that kind of makes sense for people. So you were talking about architects, town planners, accountants. Like, who are some of the professionals that you need to have on your team when you're doing, let's just say, a 1 into 4 subdivision and build?
You could start even before that and start thinking about, well, what structure am I going to use? And for that, you need a good accountant, somebody very familiar with property and ideally property development. I often call them a property accountant, but I suppose technically there's no such thing. But we know what we mean when we talk about that, and particularly
somebody know the difference.
Somebody, not the $79 tax return down at the Westfield Shopping Centre. That's not where you go for this. So get the structure right first of all, and that's not something you just grab off the shelf and it's the same for everybody. It depends on a number of things, but I mean the whole point of the correct structure is to minimise tax, which has got to be a good thing, and also asset protection. So having set that up, let's say, so what do you need? You need an accountant. You're going to need a lawyer. You're going to have to buy a property. You're going to have to sell them at the end. That could be a conveyancer, but it can get a bit more complex in property development where you need a property lawyer as opposed to just a conveyancer. But
that's actually a really good tip. Like, think about not just going to your local conveyancer, have actually a solicitor that does property law and because that's something that I think would be easily overlooked. And I imagine some conveyancers would think that, oh yeah, I should take this on. No, they can't.
Yeah, I have seen people get into trouble that way. Yeah, you know, the great man said, "What is it? Price is what you pay, and value is what you get." Well, yep. that might be a good one for today, even though I stole it from somebody else.
It's the quote of the week.
Yeah, quote of the week.
Sorry, yeah. Go on with the professional. Sorry, I cut you off there.
So we're going to do a little 1 into 4 lot subby. So the professionals are not too many because we're not building anything. So we're not building a building. As soon as you start to build a building, even if it was a duplex or townhouses, a lot more professionals are required. But something like a little subdivision, well, we need a surveyor for sure. Mm-hmm. We might need a town planner, although a good consulting surveyor often knows enough about town planning for something as simple as a subdivision. So you could have a surveyor and a town planner, or it might be just a really good consulting surveyor. And the other person's a civil engineer, because that's all around the services, you know. So when we're doing a subdivision, yeah, it has to be surveyed. Starts off at 1 lot, ends up in 2 lots. We're going to have a plan of subdivision. That's all the surveyor. We've got to get an approval. Well, it could be the consulting surveyor side of it, or it could be a town planner. Got to get our approval, and then we've got to get the services, the water, the stormwater, the sewage. That has to be dealt with.
What do you typically, when you're first off finding a site, what do you look at? And I suppose it depends on what you're looking to do. But
yeah. It's good to know what you're going to look for. Like you might say, okay, I want to do a 2 lot subdivision. Well, that's good. At least now we know what you've got to look for, you know. Yep. Or I want to do duplex, or I want to do 3 townhouses. So I think the first thing to do is understand what it is you're looking for. Yep. And you might be happy with any of those things, you know. But I think it's always better if you target it. And so I'm just looking at 2 steps before you actually go looking. One is to work out what you can afford. I mean, if you can afford to do a duplex, don't go looking for 6-packs. So work out what you can afford, and that might mean a conversation with a good finance broker who can have a look at your financial situation, your assets, what you earn, and so forth, and say, okay, this is the sort of thing you could afford to do. So, okay, now I know I can afford it. If you can't afford it, then you're going to have to think about an investor. But so, okay, and now what am I going to do? So it might be that you could afford to do a duplex. Okay, well, let's go and look for a site for a duplex, or whatever it happens to be. Now we go looking. And so how do you do that? Well, I mean, to keep it simple, you can either look yourself or someone can look for you. So I'm talking about a buyer's agent or a buyer's advocate who had some experience in development sites, you know, not necessarily one that just finds houses for people or investment properties, but someone who's got a bit of experience in that area. And so you could look at that. Or you could look yourself, or you could do both if you wanted to. But at least how you're going to look. Now, if you're going to go looking yourself, it's good if you narrow an area down. I call that selecting your patch. So you might say, okay, there's an area over here. It mightn't be far from where you live. That'd be handy. You know, another suburb or 2 could even be where you live. Okay, it's got the right zoning, which means I can do a townhouse there, and you choose a patch. The reason you don't choose a whole city is, as we know, even from property investment or anything, there's so many markets within a capital city. You know, like massive city like Sydney, there could be 30 markets. Who knows? I've got no idea. But just geographically and from a price point of view, there's so many different markets. You can't be an expert in all of those markets. You can be an expert in 1 or 2, and that's what you need to do. You need to be what I call the local expert. So having worked out what we can afford, having worked out what we want to do, we choose our area and we start to dig deep. So one of the first things I'd do is I'd have a look in that area and I'd work out who are the agents who could help me find a site. And they're probably the same agents that sell new projects, because often agents that sell projects sell sites, because that's how they get the projects to sell. So it makes sense. And so even from the comfort of your armchair, you could hop on Domain or realestate.com. You could bring up the suburb that you're interested in. You could put in, let's say, townhouses or whatever it is you're looking for. And you can put a price range in, which might knock some of the cheaper old secondhand product out. and all of a sudden you'd start to see, let's say, some new townhouse projects that are for sale. And then you can see who those agents are, because they quite often that agent exclusively sells new projects, and there's probably other people in the office that sell, maybe someone does apartments, someone does secondhand property, and they're the people you need to talk to. And you also, when they have if they've got any opens, open for inspections on whenever, you should go there and have a look at what other developers are building and talk to the agents and get to know them. So I've chosen my patch. Now I'm looking, and there might only be 3 or 4 agents in my patch that I really want to talk to. And they're the ones that sell new projects. And I'll be talking to them about sites, about projects, about values, and really get to know them. Or if I was using a buyer's agent or buyer's advocate, I'd need to brief them on exactly what I wanted and where I wanted it. But then they might head out and use all their contacts to try and find something.
Yeah, well, this is what I love about development and subdivision. Like as I said, we purchased a subdivision site, and based on the zoning rules is we can fit 2 townhouses on the back, but we don't want to build the townhouses and put all the money into it because it's going to take a long time, and we just want to return that capital a lot faster. But we can't subdivide and split the land because council can't see the 2 townhouses built, and they probably won't accept them. So what we have to do is sell as one lot at the back. But there's so many opportunities there because we can buy the whole lot, and eventually if it doesn't work out, we can sell the house with the subdivision, or we can sell the house with the subdivision and the DA attached to it, or we can sell the front house, keep the back lot, or we can keep the back lot, sell the front house, or we can keep the back house built. There's so many options, there's so many exits, and I think that people get a little bit too stuck in the way.
Overcomplicating it, I think. Sure.
I'm going to move. Yeah, exactly. I'm going to lose money on here. I put $500,000 into this. I could lose $500,000. Well, no, you might lose $50,000. You might lose your stamp duty and your sales costs, but you may, on the upside, have a lot more of an opportunity. And there's so many great exit strategies that you can go through.
Yeah, just on 2 lots.
Just on 2 lots.
6, 7, 8 exit strategies.
Yeah.
Are there those type of exit opportunities in larger lot subdivisions?
Oh, well, I mean, only to a degree, but I mean, with larger subdivisions, I mean, there's the option always of, just selling lots, or you could sell some to builders. You could joint venture with builders. You could build specs and sell them. I mean, there are some options in that respect. I've worked for some of the big development companies in the past where we did like large subdivisions, maybe 800 lots, and if we did a 40 lot, we might we might give 10 out to builders on builders terms, where they don't have to pay for the land straight away. Then we might build 10 houses and just sell them as specs, and then others, we might work at house and land pack, just different things. Cut the 40 up into different exit strategies out of the same stage of land.
What I wanted to ask is, out of all the states in Australia, there's so many states in Australia. Do you find that some states are more developer friendly, or it's easier to develop in certain states than other states?
Victoria.
Not Victoria. But we already know the answer to that first bit.
Well, yeah, it's not just states; it can be councils. I mean, Victoria does have a little bit of a reputation whereby a number of the councils, I'm not going to say all of them because it wouldn't be all of them, but I think, in my opinion, too many councils in Victoria take too much notice of objectors. And I'm talking about frivolous objectors. So when somebody's got a development permit and they've lodged it, and it comes up for public notification where people can comment on it, a lot of the comment from people is what I call frivolous. Like, there's too many cars on the street. This thing should have a garage for 3 cars. Well, that's fine, but the planning scheme says you only need 2. But they don't know or care about the planning scheme. So you do get a lot of frivolous responses from people, and in my opinion, a number of the councils in Victoria take too much notice of those people. Whereas I'm thinking of other councils in other places where if that person doesn't have a town planning ground for that objection, then it really shouldn't hold any water. Like some people say, oh, when I moved here, there was no townhouses, and now I've got one on the other side. Now I've got 4 families living there, and now, you know, this one on the other side of me. I didn't come here to live between 8 families. Well, yeah, maybe, but the land's zoned for that. And I can tell you what, when that person eventually sells, they'll be looking for a developer. So back to the question, yeah, it can happen a bit in Victoria, a bit like that, and some of the development permits can take a bit longer. Well, that's just like,
Well, yeah, and also some states' rules are much easier to understand. Like South Australia, they have a governing. They look after the developments. Obviously, there are councils as well that you have to go through for the development applications. But like in New South Wales, it's so much more harder because you've got the local environment plan, you've got the overlay as what. That's it, SCP, the LEP. Yeah, is there states that are easier to get into developing? What states are easiest to get into developing?
Oh, well, you mentioned South Australia. I mean, also council. I mean, Queensland. Well, I live in Queensland. It's not a secret. But I mean, I've met councils here who had for some reason, a lot of green. And I'm not against green at all, but a lot of green councillors came into a particular council at one election, and they were like almost violently almost anti-business, anti-development, anti-everything, and everything just shut down. And that was a council, you know. I know it's a bit of a weird thing, but look, it can even come down to the person at the council. I've had differing opinions within the same council between 2 of their town planners about something, you know, and some of it's how they interpret things, because not everything's absolutely black and white, and some people might just have a bit of a bug about something, you know.
Might have a bad day.
South Australia, Queensland. I mean, at the end of the day, you got a professional called a town planner, and the town planner is very familiar with the requirements of the planning scheme. They're all over it. If they're familiar with that particular council, that's the one I'd engage. And look, you get there. I mean, there's always, if you get knocked back, you can always go to court. The retirement village I'm doing, I had to go to court to get the approval. I was fully within my rights. They should have approved it, but they didn't. And I ended up in the Land Environment Court. I spent $1 million to win it. But, you know, sometimes that's what you got to do. And
you got to figure out which things you got to object to.
They were wrong in every respect. They had 30 reasons, and every one of them eventually got thrown out of court. But, you know, that's councils. They wield a lot of power.